The lands of Minervia have been struck by a disaster, accompanied by turmoil. The capital has been destroyed, and the people of Minervia have split into different factions, each helping people and refugees relocate as well as rebuild Minervia's damaged lands. Take on the role of one of these leaders, tending, rebuilding, and improving the lands. Compete against one another in order to gain public favor, crown points, and become the next ruler of Minervia. Now we're going to look at how to play the game. Players are racing to earn crowns before the game ends. The player with the most crowns wins. You get crowns in different ways from each of the 4 actions. Squares you tend are worth 1 crown, buildings you build are worth 3 crowns. Capturing special features on the map is worth crowns, and ruining your opponent's lands is worth crowns. Let's look at a 3-person game. Because this is a 3-person game, the boxes that say 4 on them will not be used. Each player chooses their starting outpost and tends a number of squares next to it, outlining and drawing sprouts in the empty squares and coloring in the outpost. On your turn, you take one of 4 actions: cultivate, rebuild, improve, and ruin. Violet takes the cultivate action. When you take the cultivate action, you tend the squares next to one of your buildings in an L shape. Violet outlines her new squares and draws sprouts in them. She then checks off a supply box for an action upgrade. More on these later. Max takes the rebuild action. When you rebuild, you add an outpost on a square you tend, drawing an outpost in the square and coloring it in. When taking the rebuild action, you also get to check off a second supply box for action upgrades as part of the action. Next, Suki takes the improve action. There are 3 types of improved outposts: tower, castle, or temple, and each has its own advantages. A tower gives you 1 gold at the end of your turn. A castle increases the range of your cultivate and ruin actions from that castle. A temple gives bonus crowns for every building, flag, and pennant that is adjacent to it. Suki decides to improve his outpost into a tower, drawing a little hat on the top of his outpost. He then checks off a supply box, and because he now has a tower, he gets 1 gold at the end of his turn, which is now. Now it's Violet's turn again. She decides to take the ruin action. The ruin action crosses off 1 square and tends an adjacent square starting next to any of your squares. Crossed off squares cannot be interacted with and is a good way to interrupt opponents. Crossing off certain elements, like mountains, also give you bonuses. Mountains give you 2 gold when crossed off. The ruin action also gives the player a pennant to place anywhere within their lands. After taking an action on your turn, you must check the supply box of 1 action upgrade in a different action from the one you just took, usually unlocking it for the next time you take the action you upgraded. Which upgrades you choose to unlock and in which order builds your engine and determines your strategy. For example, Max checked the supply box for this upgrade after he took his rebuild action. This means that whenever he takes the cultivate action in the future, he will tend 1 extra square next to any of his flags or pennants. So now on his turn, Max takes the cultivate action and gains these 3 squares and the flag. Then with his action upgrade, he tends this square next to his flag. He also gets this extra square because he tended new land with a road, which is a special map element. We'll look more at map elements as they come up in gameplay. Continuing on with upgrades, some upgrades cost gold to use. Some upgrades have multiple supply boxes. Those upgrades are unlocked when all of their supply boxes are checked, and you only get the upgrade if you've checked at least one of the boxes. If none of the remaining upgrades look good to you, you can spoil a supply box instead. You don't get the benefit of the upgrade, but you lock your opponents out of it and you get a 2 gold bonus. Finally, if there aren't any supply boxes left in the other actions, you check one down here. Once these are all filled, the game is over. Let's watch how this game unfolds, and I'll point out the functions of the map elements as they come up. First, the Pine Sentinel. At the end of your turn, if you tend the most squares with roots, the Pine Sentinel gives you 1 gold. At the end of the game, it gives 7 crowns for whoever tends the most squares with roots. Next, the Factory. If you tend the factory, your improved buildings are worth 5 crowns instead of 3. Rivers. Squares on opposite sides of a river aren't adjacent unless they're connected by a bridge. Basically, you need a bridge to be able to affect land on the other side of a river. Lastly, Bountiful Land. Everything built on bountiful land is worth twice as many crowns at the end of the game. Descriptions of all the special map elements can be found up here in the key. Now that the game has progressed further, we are going to take a look at one of Max's turns. This turn, Max is taking the Cultivate action. He has a number of upgrades for that action. This upgrade gives him a pendant to place within his lands. This one lets him tend 2 more squares adjacent to his core action squares. This one lets him tend 1 square next to all of his flags and pennants. Usually he would have had to pay 5 gold for the first 2 upgrades, but because he has this upgrade, all his gold costs are -1, so he only pays 3 gold. And because he took an action with no more supply boxes to check off, Max has to check off a supply box down here. Now we fast forward through the rest of the game and we'll get to scoring. Each player takes 1 column in the score grid and tallies up the crowns for the items in each row. They tally up crowns for buildings, flags, pennants, bridges, ruined land, and gold. They add in bonuses for temples and bountiful land, and subtract points for extra supply boxes. Max also gets +7 from the Pine Sentinel. This game, Suki wins.